So I'm humbled to be here today to talk to such a large group. Normally I speak to like 15 or 20 farmers, so no pressure. There looks like 1,000 people here. So I'm just going to give you a flavor today of the relevance of biosecurity. I think everybody in the room understands biosecurity. I've been coming here twice a year, working with our partners here, Zoetis, and very encouraged as I go from farm to farm about the levels of biosecurity. Thank you. Sorry, short people. And what we have to really try and understand is the question that I was asked is what is the relevance of biosecurity? And are there more diseases, or is it just that we have iPhones, Twitter, Facebook, and more people understand that there are more diseases in the world? But also we need to think very closely about resistance of disease, resistance of pathogens. And one of the eminent doctors will speak later about emerging diseases. But there's very good data and very good proof to show intrinsic and acquired resistance to simple chemistries that we use, like quatrimonium compounds and glutaraldehydes. So we really have to start thinking more about the subject of this whole seminar, and that is knowledge, and sharing that knowledge between us. We heard also from the eminent speakers earlier and from the ministry of the pressures. One of the biggest pressures I find for the broiler production in India is just the cultural festivals. In the rest of the world, we produce knowing we have a market every 7 to 8 weeks. But here, you have feasting, you have fasting, so much complication on top of the normal challenges. And when we think about feed price changes and market changes, and as the doctor just explained, the price of chicks zooming up, we're a long way away from doubling the income of farmers, which is the Prime Minister's mandate. But at the bottom of everything, a healthy bird is the most productive bird. And if we think about biosecurity like we think about our families, we make sure our babies and our children are put into the most hygienic circumstances possible. That's exactly how we should manage the farm, and that's exactly all biosecurity is. It's really making sure of the best production possible for those animals and the birds. Too many times I see a reduction of the price of chicken and immediately stop the biosecurity, stop the disinfection. This is a false economy. A productive animal making the best use of the feed gives us the profit. This is the least thing you should cut during challenge. As we saw in the prelude, I've been doing this for 30-odd years. And when we started in biosecurity, yes, we know there's a lot of medication and really good vaccinations. But we have to stop now this medication. I saw in one of the earlier slides, myth. This is not a myth. Antibiotic in the food chain means when we send our children to hospital, the drugs don't work. That's a fact. I know you have Mr. Trump or his daughter coming in a few days. You have to suddenly believe some of the stories. They're not all myths. And antibiotic, we have to reduce it. And when we reduce it, we can actually help the farmers' cost if they start thinking about biosecurity and prevention. We will always need some medication, don't get me wrong. There'll be E. coli's, there'll be salmonellas. We have to have these things. But predominantly we need to make sure we have a good vaccine policy. And then the management need to work. And going back to one of the earlier speakers, the education needs to get broader. Yes, veterinarians are focus. They're a focal point to our production. But I can tell you now, in 7 years of education, chemistry is about 2 days. So if you really want to understand the chemistry, we need more than the veterinarians alone. We need the chemical experts, and we need team. Management team working with biosecurity, giving us a return on investment. Biosecurity, and that also will include biologicals as well as we go forward, trying to reduce. So the teamwork is necessary. And as I've been coming here, I know teamwork in India is very important. When you have good teamwork, you have success. As anybody that woke up this morning and looked at the results, Sri Lanka has a headache this morning because of teamwork. And that is the type of thing we need. We need to understand the challenge. It's not just virus, bacteria. Which is it? And then the strengths and weaknesses of those virus, bacteria, and maybe fungus in the hatcheries. Select the tool and apply the best practice. There's a lot of information available, but it's not always entirely relevant to India. So you have to think about how your production is managed. I've been lucky enough to tour the farms right across the country. I know there's a lot of environmentally controlled houses, but there's also more open houses. And those open houses, really we have to think about the biosecurity. It's huge. It's not one subject. Wild birds alone don't take any notice of a foot dip or a barrier. And yet they bring the avian influenza, Newcastle disease, infectious bronchitis. When you get the day-old chicks from the hatchery, are they the perfect chicks? Not always, but you have to do whatever you can and make sure that transport is good. We heard also today about the reduced quality of water. Water is key and very important. A chick needs twice as much water as feed to grow, and that water must be good quality. Contamination of simple things, equipment, services, vehicles, feed bags, egg trays, all these are potential vectors of disease. So your biosecurity is a huge subject. Even before we start thinking about insects and rodents and how we get rid of unfortunate mortality. There will be mortality. I visit too many farms that tell me they have 3.89% mortality. That is a myth. Most of them have 7%, 8%, 3%. Nobody has 3.89 except in a textbook. So you need some transparency, you need some honesty to understand all these different criteria that make up that biosecurity. I'm lucky enough to work with the FAO and other governments. Since 2006, I first started working with the FAO in Indonesia, and they are doing a great job here in India. If you use some of the websites, some of the search engines, you'll find some very, very good biosecurity guides on the FAO website. And I encourage you to look at those and learn from those. Whenever we think about biosecurity, we just think about good management. You have to have a list, you have to have expertise. It's about teamwork, as I said. It's about the farm operation as well as the veterinarian giving his advice and his input. As veterinarians, all we can do is give advice on the information we have. So the more information, the better the advice. You need to know the inputs to a farm and you need to know the outputs. As well as this, the production practices, the vaccinations. More and more vaccines are moving towards the hatchery. This is good from a biosecurity point of view, having less people moving around the farms. But it's still early days here in India for those type of events. Recording and auditing and understanding the value. I'm a third-generation farmer. So my grandfather, he only spent money when the bird was sick. Medication. I understand that. And then he would leave the building open 20 days between one crop and the next crop. All that did was make the bacteria grow. He didn't know that at that time. I didn't know that at that time. So we have to learn and we have to understand the different things that are happening, and each farm, whether it's the very illustrious Saguna farms or whether it's the smallest farm, they have the same production. They have the same strengths and weaknesses in that production. And feed mills must take responsibility. We pay 70% of our input costs to feed companies. So they must make sure when they deliver the product, that vehicle is disinfected. The driver is following biosecurity. As farmers amongst the group here, put that pressure back on the feed company. You pay a very high amount at the end of each month for the feed. Make them take responsibility for those drivers and those vehicles. It can't all be down to the farm alone. And keep out. The simplest cost, maybe 30, 40 rupees, a sign at the gate. Nobody should go into a farm that doesn't bring value to the farm on the day they go in. That's a very simple rule. But we have to think about who is the enemy. And the enemy are the pathogens. And we have more and more data available to us today than at any time since I've been in education. I was on the left-hand side. I was books. And I'm sure many of the gentlemen here, the doctors on the first row, also, all books. Now you have a smartphone. You can simple Newcastle disease, strengths and weakness. You have it in a second. So use these tools and learn what the diseases are coming to each farm. Because you need that list. There is no point buying any hygiene products, any disinfectant, unless you know the challenge you have. You have to know which virus and which bacteria, because they all have differences. They all have different tendencies and resistances to some chemistries. So we need that list. And if I ask a farm, do you have a virus challenge? He says, no, no virus challenge. Why are you buying vaccine? Because if you're buying vaccine, you're reducing the risk of a virus challenge. So that is a virus challenge. So that should be on the list. And once you have your vaccine list, and then the record of what attacked that farm, whether it's E. coli, salmonella, whatever challenged that farm, you need to inactivate before the next cycle. And that is the key to biosecurity. Understanding these challenges, that's the vet's job. The vet as part of your team. The vet knows the difference between an envelope virus and a non-envelope virus. But does he know the chemistry to inactivate avian influenza doesn't necessarily inactivate Gumboro disease? This is where the teamwork comes. This is where we have to think about that teamwork very closely. And now we have superbugs. We have E. coli resistant to glutaraldehyde chemistry and quaternionium chemistries. So it's really important we understand what the challenges are. And this presentation you can take later. I saw a couple of guys taking a photo, but you can take the presentation later. No problem with that. Whenever you see the presentation, there will always be references on websites to check everything that I say, basically, because it's very important you have accurate information. There isn't time to go through all the different pathogens, but give you one example of virus. All virus, envelope and non-envelope, are very strong and very stable in a neutral pH chemistry. What that means is they survive a long time in fecal matter, which is neutral pH. So if you attack it, you try to inactivate with a neutral pH chemistry, it takes a long time because they're stable. So you need an alkaline or an acid. Simple, but complex at the same time. So, as I said, you need chemistry working with veterinarians to understand these simple things from that. You know you have avian influenza challenge, and unfortunately it will come every year. This comes on the wings of the wild birds. I know you recently declared AI-free, but avian influenza survives 150 days in water. So unless the government has been checking all the water sources, I doubt it's entirely free. So we have to think about every year the migration comes, every year there's a challenge. Okay, mitigate. You have to improve biosecurity during this migration period. There have been outbreaks in other areas, but these are caused by vehicle or bird transfer, egg transfers. Again, you have to think about this and you know when these times are happening. So when we think about the biosecurity, we have lots of support. Genetics, vaccine, medication, housing and management, none of them will inactivate the challenge. They are all treatments or reducing risk. The only thing that breaks the cycle of a pathogen is inactivation during cleaning and disinfection. It's as simple as that. If you don't clean and then disinfect, you will not stop the challenge from one cycle to the next cycle. That is the essence of the hygiene part of biosecurity. And that can be in barriers, end of the cycle, or you can use biosecurity during the crop, especially if you have multi-age sites and open housing. Selecting the tools, selecting the right disinfectant is a balance. And this balance is not easy. The first thing we always think about is price. and price is important. But first, pathogen. Which type of chemistry will inactivate the challenge on your farm? So which virus were you attacked by? Which virus are you vaccinating against? You need data from that disinfectant. It inactivates that pathogen. Data should be available. Then think about the season and the temperature. Here is hot, very hot, and extremely hot. You get a little bit of cold in the north. So think about that as, if you imagine this as a surface, how fast does this surface dry in the hot temperature? And you're using a chemistry that takes 20 minutes to inactivate a pathogen. You're starting behind the game line. You're starting with a fast bowler when it needs a spin bowler. So you have to think about this when you're choosing the chemistries. Because if you have fast-acting chemistry, you have more chance of inactivation in those situations. And again, when I was growing up, we bought what we called residual chemistry, because we apply it to the surface and it keeps acting. We thought that was brilliant, except the keep acting part is non-lethal dose. When you apply the chemistry, it's a lethal dose. The reaction is non-lethal, leading to the acquired and intrinsic resistance, as we now know today with certain chemistries. So think about those things. And obviously the danger to livestock and the people, and making sure things are safe and secure. Yes, the price is important, and it needs to be a return on investment. And that's a whole part of your management. The chemistries, it's too involved to do all the chemistries in a very short presentation. But the chemistries will all inactivate bacteria, all of them, if they're applied correctly. But your biggest challenge is the virus. Enveloped and non-enveloped are very, very different in persistence and resistance. And even bacteria now became resistant against some chemistries. When you think about virus, in simple terms, Gumboro, chicken anemia virus, adenovirus, reovirus, all small non-enveloped virus. Very difficult to inactivate with some chemistries. So you need to balance that choice. At this point in time, oxidative chemistry, and I saw it on the layer farms in the north, they're using chlorine dioxide. Chlorine dioxide is oxidative chemistry. Also parasitic chemistry and triple salts and those type of chemistries. No resistance at this point in time known to those. So you have at least a rotation opportunity. But think about how fast the surface dries. To me, that's one of the biggest challenges I found going through India, especially on the layer farms. We only clean and disinfect probably once a year, once every 60 weeks perhaps. Surfaces very small, vast, very fast drying. We need to make sure we inactivate pathogens. And be very careful with any aldehyde chemistry on concrete floors, because the secondary gas damages the trachea of the chicken. If you have infectious bronchitis or any respiratory challenge, it will be worse if you're using aldehyde chemistry on concrete floors. Proven data, all available to you. One of the takeaways I would like to make sure that you understand from biosecurity is, if you're thinking about disinfection, don't bother unless you clean. If you don't clean, you cannot disinfect. I'm part of a manufacturing company. When we manufacture the disinfectant, we do it to government standard. Government standard means 4 or 5 log reduction. That's it. That is the government standard, the requirement of our manufacture. We don't try in animal health to do more than that. In human health, we do 6, 7, 8 log reduction, but in animals, not. So if you start with fecal matter, you have effectively a power of 10 in logs in dirt. So if you don't clean, you cannot disinfect. It's as simple as that. And water alone will not clean a house. Water doesn't have the capability to break the surface tension of dirt. So you really have to think about clean before you disinfect. You can check, you can do swabs, you can do all sorts of things as auditing and those type of precautions. But if you don't clean, you cannot disinfect. And the best way to check your hygiene practice, you see it in all the breeding books. Hubbard, Aviagen, Cobb, whichever breed you're using, they will advise you, check the 7-day wait. You can prove your disinfection, prove your hygiene by checking the 7-day wait. Do trials on your own farm. Some house with, some house without. Check the 7-day wait. I guarantee if you do the applications correctly, your hygiene practices well, those 7-day waits will be higher. That is the return on investment that you need. Because nobody wants to spend money unless it should be spent wisely. And just from a very brief political note, because I was listening to Dr. Khan and the Prime Minister's idea to double farmers' income, or profitability perhaps. One thing I would think about in India is the GST. Try and reduce the GST on preventative methods in the production. How can a farmer earn more if you keep charging him more and more GST every time he buys something? So, short political thing. A lot in India. No disinfectant kills virus in a bird after they've already contracted challenge. All we do is reduce pathogen pressure to increase food conversion and make profitability. Disinfection and hygiene is only there as support. You need your antibiotics and you need your vaccines for those inside the animal activities. But with aerial applications, we can reduce the pressure if we have fasting-acting chemistry, and this is proven again with some very viable and good data. But there's also the water lines, and we put a lot through those water lines. We're putting medication through the water line. We're putting antibiotics through the water line. We're putting minerals and vitamins through the water line. And every time we do that, we have a carrier that starts to think about biofilm. And in the biofilm, we get continual resurgence and challenge in the flocks. So at the end of the cycle, you really must have a good protocol to clean and disinfect the water line. If you don't do the house, you only have time for one thing: do the water line. The water line is the lifeblood of those chickens. And again, you have to think about which viruses and which challenges. And there are simple things. Safe to use in the presence of the birds. Safe to use in the water lines. Quatrimoniums, yes. Effective, not so much. Glutaraldehyde, no. Phenol, no. Oxidative chemistries, yes. So you have to look at the different chemistries, not the products. The chemistries are the key factor. So it's a very brief introduction to biosecurity, but it's very, very important. And I know here in India, you do a very good job. I visited big farms and I visited small farms. Personally, I love going to the small farms. My colleagues know, take my shoes off, just get in there and help. Sometimes I get more response from a guy with 5,000 chickens than I do with a guy with 2 million. Because the 2 million chicken guy knows more than I do. Well, he says so anyway. The 5,000 guy is very happy to get help. And I think the government should focus a little bit more on the small guys as well. It's okay to have integration. It's okay to have monopolies of size. But as a culture, and as a challenge here, you have the small farms. Reducing antibiotics is a must. But here, because you sell so many birds live, there is no check. Nobody really knows how much antibiotic we're eating. We might go to paradise and have lovely chicken biryani. Maybe we're having tetracycline and rice. We don't know, because nobody is checking. So, biosecurity, how relevant? When the good doctor first sent me this topic, I was almost like, what do you mean, how relevant? That is the key. And it is. It's the key to, as the doctor quite rightly said in our open introduction, the basis of reducing disease. Yes, you have antibiotics to cure challenge. You have vaccines to try and prevent challenge. But once a bird gets infectious bronchitis, what are you going to do? You can't suddenly give a bird vaccine now. Antibiotics don't work. So all you have left is some biosecurity, some disinfection during the cycle to reduce the pathogen, and then you must inactivate in that house that challenge before the birds come again. The threats to the industry are big enough, but to the birds themselves, we have big challenge. Because we have mutation, we have acquired resistance, we have intrinsic resistance, and we need to work together on these challenges. And it's not just antibiotics, chemistries as well, with this resistance challenges. If we are able to control those challenges, you will have profitable poultry production, which is essentially what the government wants, what the big farmers want, what the small farmers want. And you really need to think about working together, because you can't work separately. You have to think of biosecurity with veterinarians, with vaccines, with some medication, with education. And I applaud the gentleman earlier, the doctor was suggesting we need more education, more bursaries, not just veterinarians. Of course, veterinarians will say, no, you need veterinarians. We are a protected industry. But we need chemists, and we need people that understand how to read data and look at the strength and the weakness. I was doing a summary for a farm in Canada, totally abstract from India, but it's now in their summer. They had adenovirus challenge and a reovirus challenge in the farm. So when I did more research, because I'm trying to help, I didn't know before that reovirus lasts 70 days in water as well. So we have avian influenza, which we have here, 150 days survival in water, and now I know another virus that survives 70 days in water. So the water line is very, very important, and you need to take consideration for that. But again, work as a team. That's what Indians know how to do best. As I said, Sri Lanka woke up this morning with a headache. 189 for 3 yesterday. Finished, but we still have a day to go. But working as a team, farmers, veterinarians, chemical suppliers like Zoetis, my colleagues here in the country, and service providers. You need to do that. You need to think biosecurity is the key and understand that. Thank you for your attention.